Hello students, welcome to Daily Chronicles by Aviram IAS. So today, let's learn most important topics from the Indian Express, PIB and also the Hindu. Okay, today's important topics are about Nisar. Let's talk about the initiatives in agriculture and let's talk about the anemia and also let's talk about the 8th schedule of Indian Constitution and also lastly, let's talk about the foreign portfolio investments. Now, first article is about the Nisar. Now, why this is in news? So basically, there is an article like ISRO and NASA mission Nisar may finally launch in the month of June. Okay. Now, in this context, let's talk about Nisar. If you see, Nisar stands for N for NASA, I for ISRO. That means you can understand it is a collaboration between USA and also India. Okay. And here SAR stands for synthetic radar aperture. Okay, synthetic aperture radar. Okay, synthetic aperture radar. Now, what is radar here? Or else, what is synthetic aperture radar? Basically, this synthetic aperture radar is nothing but it is in high resolution. It takes the high resolution photos by using the radio waves. Okay. For capturing the high resolution photos. Now, let's talk about Nisar in brief. So basically, we saw Nisar is nothing but NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. Okay. Now, it is a joint collaboration between USA and also India. Now, this is designed for low Earth orbit. What is low Earth orbit? Basically, around 200 kilometers to 1600 kilometers of Earth above the Earth surface. Okay. The distance from 200 kilometers to 1600 kilometers of above Earth surface. Okay. Now, what is this objective basically? See, simple thing. Like for observing the Earth changes, climatic changes, and also the volcanic eruptions, tracking the melting of ice sheets. Basically, it is giving a 360 comprehensive angle related to the climate changes. So, the objectives here are tracking the changes in the Earth surface, monitoring the groundwater surfaces, and also detecting the signs of tsunamis, volcanic eruptions or any disaster management related things. And also further, it is also tracking the melting of ice sheets even in the Antarctic regions. Okay. Now, what is the mission life? Basically, the mission life is 3 years. Actually, it was to be launched in the year 2024, but there was a delay and in the year it is now launching in the year 2025 in the month of June. Okay. What is its functions? It basically takes the high resolution images of the Earth's land and also ice sheets and also the sea surface for every 12 days. It gives the information for every 12 days and it takes the high resolution pictures. And further, it will also detect the movements as small as even if there is a disturbance like 0.4 inches of disturbance also, then it gives the information. It takes the high resolution information even for the small movements. It also detects the small movements. Okay, that is the function of this. So basically, Nisar is nothing but it is an high resolution camera. Okay, high resolution camera to capture the movements of the Earth surfaces. Like it also detects the disaster managements and also detects the melting of the ice in the Antarctic regions. Okay, clear? Now, as I said, it is a collaboration between NASA and ISRO. Now, let's see what NASA is providing and what ISRO is providing. So, from NASA, we are getting L-band radar. Basically, this L-band radar frequency is from 1 to 2 gigahertz. Now, here the frequency is less, right? This is the frequency of L-band. As frequency is less, it will give more wavelength. So, more wavelength as frequency is inversely proportional to wavelength. Right? So, more wavelength. What if there is more wavelength? It can capture it can capture even photos in the deep areas also. And NASA is also providing GPS and data systems and also the data recorder. Now, coming to ISRO, it is providing S-band radar where the frequency is from 2 to 4 gigahertz and it is having less wavelengths. Okay. more frequency, less wavelength. And also ISRO is giving satellite body support, and also it is providing GSLV rocket for the launch. Now, from where it is launching? From Sriharikota. Okay, it is scheduled to be launched in Sriharikota. Where is Sriharikota? Andhra Pradesh. And further, if we see the significance of L-band, basically L-band is the below the surface and tracks the slow ground changes. As we saw, even it detects the minor movements also, like it captures even 0.0 centimeters of movements. That small movements it can capture. Okay, now also S-band. What is the significance of S-band here? Basically, S-band sees the surface level changes like crop growth or also urban sprawl, and it also detects the groundwater levels. Okay. So simply, what is the significance of NISAR? Nothing but if you see there is a volcanic eruption, immediately it will signal there is a volcanic disaster happening there. And if you see there is a groundwater depletion, it gives that here groundwater is depleting before, it gives in a very pre-advanced stage. Now, let's see the applications of this satellite technology, that is NISAR. As we saw, Earth observation, even the small deformation of the land, ice sheet movements, and also ecosystem changes. And further, it is also giving the observations related to the climate change also, like glacier melting, sea level rise, and also carbon storage variations. This is important for mains perspective. You can use this diagram, and also further it is giving disaster management related things, like if there is an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or tsunami, it gives the pre-advanced information. And also agriculture, like groundwater depletion, crop growth, soil moisture, and also the land use. Okay, these are the applications of the NISAR. Now, moving to the next article. What is next article? So the next article is India reaffirms its commitment to sustainable agriculture in the 15th BRICS meet. So basically, Union Agriculture Minister have been joined the Agriculture Ministers meeting of the BRICS. Okay, and further, this BRICS agriculture ministers, all the ministers of BRICS, agriculture ministers of the BRICS, have been launched the BRICS Land Restoration Partnership to address the land degradation, desertification, and also soil fertility loss. Okay. Now, in this context, let's see the initiatives, important initiatives regarding the agriculture sector. Okay. Now, before talking about the initiatives of agriculture, let's see the let's see the brief introduction of BRICS. Now, what is BRICS? It is an international organization where B stands for Brazil, R for Russia, I for India, C for China, and S for South America. Okay. Further, in the year 2024, there were 5 other countries have been joined. That is Egypt, Ethiopia, UAE, Iran, and also Saudi Arabia. And further, recently, in the year 2025, Indonesia has been also added into the BRICS list. Now, where is the headquarters of BRICS? It is in Shanghai. Okay, headquarters of BRICS is in Shanghai, in China, right? This is a little brief introduction of the BRICS. Now, let's see the key initiatives with regarding to the agriculture sector. First is the Digital Agriculture Mission. In the name itself, you can see something related to digital. So, it is giving the digital data. It is providing digital data to the farmers, right? So, Digital Agriculture Mission, something it is providing the information digitally. It is launched by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Okay, here itself we can see agriculture related. So, released by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Now, what is the key objectives? Basically, to develop the digital public infrastructure. What is digital public infrastructures? Basically, the app related things digitally. Examples? AgriStack, we know. Enam also. And recent, every day we'll use, what is that? Aadhaar. Aadhaar is also DPI. And others among them. Okay. So, AgriStack, Enam, and Aadhaar are few examples of digital public infrastructure, and also to implement the digital generated crops estimation survey, and also to provide the digital general crop estimation survey. And further, it also enables the IT innovations across the central, state, and also academics and research bodies. Now, okay, So what is the concept of this digital agriculture mission? See, in the name itself, we are able to see something related to digital, and it is released by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. What is the objective of this mission? Basically, to give the digital information to the public. So it has been created digital public infrastructures, example like ENAM, and also the AgriStack with respect to the agriculture sector. Okay. And also to implement the digital general crop estimation survey, basically the crop estimation survey. And further, it is also enabling the IT innovative services across the central, state, academics, and also researchers. Now further, if we see that digital public infrastructure key details, so basically this digital agriculture mission is divided into 3 components, that is AgriStack, Krishi DSS, that is the decision support system, and also soil profiling maps. Now, if we see the 3 components of digital agriculture mission, they are AgriStack, Krishi DSS, and also soil profile maps. Let's see briefly about them. So what is AgriStack providing here? AgriStack is nothing but central digital infrastructure which consisting of 3 foundational registers or databases basically, and they are farmers registry about the farmers, crop registry about the crops, crop sown registry, what are the crops have been sowed that year, and also geo-referred village maps. Okay, so AgriStack is providing 3 data repositories. One is about the farmers registry, and the second is the crop sown registry, and the third one is geo-referred village maps. And second thing is the Krishi DSS. It's nothing but that is a decision support system which is integrating the geospatial data. Same like, for example, GPS. But this is farmers GPS, okay, provided by India. GPS is provided by US. But Krishi DSS is same like GPS, that is farmers GPS, which is provided by India. So this is a decision support system integrating the geospatial data on crop, soil, water, and weather to assess the crop mapping, drought monitoring, and also crop insurance. Okay. So basically, simply it is nothing but it gives the data related to the, now if farmer is sowing a crop, this Krishi DSS, what it does is, if you are growing the wheat crop, it will tell at what season you have to sow the wheat and at what season you have to collect the wheat. And also, it also says that if there is any disaster related things, it monitors, okay, disaster management things also. Like at what time you have to keep the water, at what time you have to take the crop output, okay, like that. So it is a decision support system which is integrating the geospatial data and on crops, soil, water, weather, etc. Okay, and soil profile mapping. In the name itself, you can see that it is related to the mapping of the soil, detailed soil maps of 142 million hectares at 1:1000 scale, and it is inventory for approximately 29 million hectares already. It has given the data for 29 million hectares of the land. Okay, simply it is nothing but soil profile mapping, giving the profiling details related to the soils, okay, across the country. So this is the digital public infrastructure. Okay, one is the AgriStack. These 3 components are from Digital Agriculture Mission. One is AgriStack, and other is Krishi DSS, and other is the soil profile maps. Now, further, let's see about the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. What is sustainable agriculture here? Sustainable agriculture is nothing but without harming the environment. Okay, without harming the environment, doing the practices of agriculture. Simple. Now, this mission is launched in the year 2010, okay, under the NAPCC, that is the National Action Plan for Climate Change. Okay, so this National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture is one of the 8 components. There are 8 components in this NAPCC, that is National Action Plan for Climate Change, and one among them is National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. Now, what is this objective basically? Okay, before that, nodal ministry, same, Agriculture and Farmers Welfare Ministry is a nodal ministry. Now, what is objective? To provide the sustainable agriculture practices through climate resilient practices that helps in increasing the productivity of the crops, enhancing the soil health, and also conserving the natural resources like water, soil, okay, and also the biodiversity. It is simply nothing but related to the sustainable agriculture practices of India. Okay, why? To increase the crop yield, that is increasing the productivity, also to enhance the soil health. Why? There has been desertification nowadays. Okay, so crop yield is decreasing, right? So to protect the soil health and also conserving the natural resources like water and biodiversity. Now, if we see the National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture's 4 pillars, they are the rainfed area development, agroforestry, and also related to soil, that is soil health management, and also Parampat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Now, what is this rainfed area? Rainfed area development, basically the area where it is completely reliable on only rainfall. Okay, completely the places reliable on rainfall. Now, what it is helping for? It is helping for integrated farming and also water conservation methods. Now, next is the agroforestry. What is agroforestry? Combination of plants plus livestock at one place, at one land. That is agroforestry. So basically what is this agroforestry for? Land protection and also extra income. And further, the other thing is soil health management, for testing the soil and giving the natural inputs to the soil to increase the soil fertility. Okay, what happens if there is a soil fertility, increase of soil fertility? More crop yield, right? More crop yield. Okay, and the next one is Parampat Krishi Vikas Yojana. What is this for? To promoting the organic farming and also the traditional methods what we have to follow. Okay, these are the 4 pillars of National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. Now, the next one is NICRA. What is NICRA? National Innovation for Climate Resilience Agriculture. Now, in the name itself, you can see Climate Resilience Agriculture. What is Climate Resilience Agriculture? Simply, now you can see the climate change. Okay, so basically, like adapting to the climate changes, adapting to agriculture, adapting to the climate changes, like in what areas, what crops has to be sown. Okay, simply, okay. So what is a nodal agency? ICAR, that is Indian Council of Agriculture and Research, is the nodal agency. Then the objective is to enhance the resilience of the Indian agriculture with respect to crops, livestock, and also fisheries, with respect to the climate change and climate variabilities. Okay, simply nothing but making the agriculture adaptable to the climate changes. Okay, now what are the key components of this? Basically, strategic research, like for development of climate resilient crop varieties, like droughts, floods, and also salinity tolerant crops. Now see, simple thing, you can't expect sugarcane to be grown in less water, right? So this thing will tell in what areas, what crops have to be sown. Okay, and also technology demonstration, like on farming demonstrations of resilient technologies in 151 climate resilient villages. And here it is also having 4 pillars, and they are strategic research, researching on climate varieties and also livestock, and also capacity building, like infrastructure, and also training, like training for climate related issues for the farmers. Okay, training of climate related issues for the farmers. Now the next 2 are technology demonstration, for testing and showcasing new technologies in villages. For example, Happy Seeder, okay, which collects the crop residue, Happy Seeder. And the other thing is sponsored research, where funding innovative techniques are provided in this sponsored research and also research and development. Now, further, let's talk about the anemia. Why this is in news? There is a PIB article related to India's fight against the anemia, to nourish, to prevent and protect the persons from anemia. We all know what is anemia. What is anemia? So, okay, low hemoglobin levels. Where is hemoglobin present? In the blood, right? So low hemoglobin levels in the blood is anemia, and it is leading to the reduced oxygen transport in the body, right? So a condition marked by the low hemoglobin levels in the blood, and this is leading to the low transportation of oxygen to the blood. And what are the causes? Two causes. One is nutritional deficiencies and other thing is non-nutritional. Nutritional, if there is lack of iron, folate, vitamin B12 and also vitamin A in the food supply. The food we eat should consist of iron, folate and also vitamin B12 and also vitamin A. So it is advisable to eat spinach, iron rich foods, B12 rich foods. Okay, instead of taking supplements, please go organically. Eat good food, okay? And if you see the non-nutritional factors like parasitic infections can also cause less amount of hemoglobin levels. Okay, like for example, malaria and also hemoglobopathies and also fluorosis. Okay, these are all leading to the anemia. And further, if you see the impact in children, there is an impaired cognitive growth and also motor development. That is, there will be less amount of motion. I mean, motion in the sense, movement of them. Okay, children can't walk properly. In adults, decreased work capacity, will be feeling low energetic. Okay, we can't do the work. Low energetic. And in pregnant women, basically, there is a risk of perinatal loss and also prematurity and also low birth of babies. Okay. So these are the impact of, impact to the children, adult and also pregnant women. And further, if you see the policy interventions of the government of India for anemia eradication, there is a policy like 6x6x6. What is this? So 6 beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? First is pregnant women, adolescent between 10 and 19 years, and the other is children between 6 and 15 months, and also children between 5 and 9 years, and also women of reproductive age, lactating women. It has covered except men. It has been covered lactating women, pregnant women, women of reproductive age, children, adolescent people between 10 to 19, and also children from 6 months to 59 months. And further, this 6 is for beneficiaries. First 6 is for who are the beneficiaries. Other 6 is for interventions. What are the 6 interventions? Prophylactic iron folic acid supplementation, who are lacking the, who are suffering from anemia and also periodic deworming of them, periodic deworming for children. Okay. And also intensified year-round behavior change communication campaign. And further, other 3 are like testing of anemia distally and seeing the hemoglobin compound in them, and also mandatory provision of iron folic acid fortified foods in the public health programs, and also addressing the non-nutritional causes of anemia in endemic pockets. And further, 6 institutional mechanism, that is coordination between various ministries and also convergence with other ministries, and also strengthening the supply chain and logistics, engaging for National Center of Excellence, and also providing the advanced research in anemia control programs, and also monitoring the Anemia Mukt Bharat dashboards. Okay, so first is beneficiaries, second is like what are the interventions for this, and the other 6 is institutional mechanisms. So 6x6x6 program, 6 beneficiaries, 6 interventions and 6 institutional mechanisms. Now next initiative, that is to combat anemia in women and children, there are several schemes have been brought up. That is, if we see the nutrition based interventions, fortified rice distribution, mixing of iron and folate acid and giving to the children and women, okay, like supply to targeted public distribution system, and also PM Poshan, and also giving the iron supplements to the pregnant women, right? And also village health and nutritional days, there like in Anganwadi centers, for every like around 1 month or 15 days, I think they're giving the folic acid supplements to the pregnant women. Okay, and if you see the maternal health schemes, first is Surakshit Matritva Awasan, that is Suman initiative. This is for this is like quality care for pregnant women and also newborns at the public health facilities, PHCs. And also Janani Sishu Suraksha Karakramam for free delivery, and they'll give medicines, diet and also supplements for pregnant women. And also Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, this is for same. They'll give the special care, antenatal care on the 9th of every month, including the anemia screening also. They'll check the hemoglobin component of the pregnant woman. And also extended, okay, this is extended, and it is also giving the incentives for tracking and supporting high-risk pregnancies with 3 additional ANC visits. Okay, that is antenatal care visits. So that is extended Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, and also further optimizing the postnatal care after the pregnancy also, both women, pregnant woman and also the child. And further health infrastructure and outreach, creating campaigns and also giving the facilities. What are they? Like blood storage units, and also training the children, and further the awareness and education for both for both women and children, and also research initiatives like where ICMR, that is Indian Council for Medical Research, is doing the research for anemia. Okay, and it is providing the healthy priority programs also. Now, moving to the next article. The next article is 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. What is 8th schedule basically telling? So 8th schedule is related to the languages. Indian languages. So what is the article about is that the article is telling simple. If you are including the languages in this 8th schedule, the other languages are being harmed. So if you are including languages in this 8th schedule, some languages here included and the other languages have been excluded, so that it is creating impact on them. Okay, negative impact on them. Now, in this context, let's talk about the 8th schedule. So, if we take the constitutional provisions of these, Article 334 Clause 1 is dealing with the President shall constitute a commission to recommend progressive use of Hindi and Hindi and limiting use of the English also. So basically Hindi and English are the official languages of the center, right, or the union, right? Now, do India have a national language? No, India doesn't have any national language. India doesn't have any national language, but it have Hindi and English as the official languages of the Union. And further, Article 351 is dealing with the duty of Union to promote Hindi for all the elements of India's composite culture. And that is why the national education policies, 3-language policy is in news. It is a burning topic now. 3-language policy, right? Where Tamil Nadu is acting against it. Okay, now we saw here, so 344 Clause 1 is like President shall constitute a commission for the progressive use of or progressive development of Hindi and limiting use of English in the Union. And further, 351 is dealing with the duty of the Union to promote the Hindi for the composite culture. Now further, let's see the languages. So basically 22 languages, but before 1950 it was only 14 languages. From 21st Amendment, this question was asked previously in 2024 itself, I think. Okay, the same question is asked, like they have given some languages and they have asked like which amendment has added which language to the official list or to the 8th schedule list. Okay, from 21st Amendment Act, Sindh was included and Konkani, Manipuri, Nepali was included from 71st Amendment. With the 71st Amendment Act, Konkani, Manipuri, Nepali has been included. From 92nd Amendment, Bodo, Dogri, Maithili and Santali were included. Again, let's see. First, originally in 1950, there was only 14 languages. With inclusion of 21st Amendment, Sindhi has come. With inclusion of Konkani, Manipuri, Nepali, 71st Amendment have been come, and including the Bodo, Dongri, Maithili, Santali, 92nd Amendment have been brought them into the official languages list, that is into the 8th schedule. So basically 20 languages: Assami, Bengali, Bodo, Dogri, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Maithili, Malayalam, Urdu, Telugu, Tamil, Sindhi, Santali, Sanskrit, Punjabi, Odia, Nepali, Marathi and Manipuri. Okay, these are the 22 languages. Now what is happening? Remember, there is no English because these are all India's languages. Why? To promote the culture and linguistic diversity of India. Okay. So there is no English. Now what is happening? You're including these two languages, that is okay. But apart from these two, there are other many languages in India, right? So if you're including the languages, basically the article is telling, you're including some languages. But when you're excluding other when you're excluding the other languages, the significance of them is going down. That is the article complaining about. So let's see the distinction between the 8th schedule languages and official languages. Okay, let's see the differences between 8th schedule and official languages. 8th schedule is related to official languages. This official language and this official languages are different. This is for languages for for businesses of union government, and this is for recognizing the language for development. Okay, Hindi role Hindi is included in 20. Among the 22 languages, and here also it is the sole official language with limiting of English. Okay. Official languages of India, and these are 8th schedule languages. And role of English, there is not listed. Okay, English is not listed in the 8th schedule, but English is allowed for the official languages. There are 2 official languages, one is Hindi and one is limited power of English also. Okay, so 8th schedule, 22 languages where English is not listed. Now further, lastly, let's talk about the foreign portfolio investment. Now, why this is in news? Because IT, financial services and capital goods stocks were worst hit by the FPI sell-off. What is this FPI? Let's see. Foreign portfolio investment. In the name itself, it is a foreign portfolio investment. So, this FPI refers to the purchase and holding of financial assets. Financial assets. But where is coming to FDI? It is physical assets. FDI is dealing with the physical assets and FPI is dealing with the financial assets like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc. by the foreign investors in a country other than or primarily for getting the quick returns. Now, simple example I'll tell you. See, I am residing in any foreign country. I am having a hotel in foreign. Now, if I want to establish a similar kind of hotel in India, I want to establish a hotel in India. Similar hotel. Now, as I'm investing the hotel in India, this is my FDI, that is direct investment. But I want to invest in the bonds of some other hotel. Bonds or mutual funds or stocks. In a hotel or whatever. So this is my FPI. Here I'm directly keeping the money. But here I'm using the indirect method like bonds, stocks or mutual funds. Did you get the difference? So as it is, I'm investing a hotel here, the same replica, that is my FDI. But investing in the stocks, bonds and mutual funds of a hotel, that is the FPI. So here it is financial asset. Here it is physical asset. Okay, remember. So FPI is nothing but purchase and holding of financial assets like stocks, bonds and mutual funds. Now, let's talk about briefly of FPI. So, what are the instruments used? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, American depository funds and also global depository receipts. Here ADR stands for American depository receipts and GDR stands for global depository receipts. And what is the invest term? It is very short term but quick returns. Short terms aiming for the quick financial gains. Liquidity, high liquidity. Okay. So quick entry and exit is possible compared to the FDI. Volatility, as it is high liquidity, it is high volatile and also risk prone. And that is why it is referred to as hot money. It is referred to as hot money because it is highly volatile in nature. Economic impact shown in the capital account expenditure in the balance of payments sheet. Okay. And further, who is the regulator of FPI in India? SEBI is dealing with the FPI. Okay. FPI is dealt by the SEBI, that is Securities Exchange Board of India. And for the type of investors, it includes foreign institutional investors and also the qualified foreign investors. Okay, once again, FPI, remember it is very important because every time it is in news. Let's recall again. FPI stands for foreign portfolio investment, FDI stands for foreign direct investment, whereas the instruments involved in FPI are stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, that is exchange traded funds, ADRs, that is American depository receipts, and global depository receipts. Invest term, short term, but more quick returns. Liquidity, high liquidity and highly volatile. That is why it is also referred to as hot money. Hot money is referred to as FPI. Okay, foreign portfolio investment. Who are the investors? Foreign institutional investors and also qualified foreign institution investors. Who is regulating this? FPI is regulated by the SEBI. Now, as a value addition, let's learn the differences between FPI and FDI. So, FPI, foreign portfolio investment, FDI, foreign direct investment. Nature of investment, it is in financial assets. FPI, financial assets. But coming to FDI, it is physical assets like cash. Okay, cash, land and companies. Stability, it is highly volatile, reacts to the market global recursions. But coming to the FDI, it is very stable in nature and also long-term investment. FPI is short-term investment. Coming to the regulating authority, SEBI is the regulating authority for FPI, and for FDI, it is DPIIT and also comes under RBI under the FEMA Act, that is Foreign Exchange Management Act. And further impact on economy, it is impacting the stock market. Okay, FPI will impact the stock market, but FDI, it will impact the infrastructure, jobs and growth and development of the country. And further, if you see the threshold, see if any foreign company is holding less than 10% in a listed company, that comes under the FPI, but FDI, it is more than 10%, obviously. If a foreign holding is greater than or less than 10%, it comes under the FDI. So this is all about the FDI and FPI differences. That's all for today. Thank you.